Hello, dear world. The title of today's episode is When the Shadows of Civilization Fade. And so this idea is important to me because I feel that most people are just trying to find the light. They're just trying to go towards a good life, that they forget the influence of the bad. We are all trying to, in some sense, get out of the shadows of our past into the new presence of our future. When I look at society, I see the yin yang symbol. And I see that in every person who is trying to be evil, they cannot avoid the idea of good staring at them every day. And for those who are good, who are trying to be just good in like a certain way, they cannot avoid the stares of evil. And so chaos and order visit every being in every lifetime. Yet this chaos and order changes. And so you accept life in its order and you flow with it in its chaos. There have been moments of life where I've been in situations where it's as if when you can't change the external, you change the internal. When you can't push the wall of a building as in the effort of trying to push the building, you make a different conclusion. You entertain a different view of the world. And so we can say that as much as our species cares for itself, it can claim it has evolved. Because the point of evolution was that it led towards a tribal direction. Random creatures roaming the earth found ways to speak and initiated organizations, and a grand organization called civilization. We became civilized. We pulled ourselves out of the dirt of non-intelligence into intelligence. When I wake up, for me, the world is alive. That means I was like, I'm alive, my mind is my moment, evidently. When I noticed that the world happens within me and what is within me is leading towards what is outside, it's as if you wake up from a dream and then don't look at reality the same way. The shadows of society are the parts of our free will that allow destruction of what has been built to occur freely. And because we're mainly in 2019, we all just think of ourselves as only physical creatures. We avoid the unknown depths of the mind, which is in some sense, the profoundness of the idea of the soul. The concept of the soul was a fingertip pointing to the stars. You must not look at the fingertip, you must see where the fingertip points to. And so, when destruction is allowed, you must, when one part of your moment of being witnesses destruction, it will inevitably have this fear in the back of your subconscious that the destruction of a part of your world is a destruction of a part of yourself. We care for now, as like the story we tell ourselves is that we're human beings and we're going to help other human beings. Yay. But in actuality, if we were to acknowledge a sort of universal presence within the eyes of each being, as if we just forgot everybody's names and said it is this universal sector that is looking through our eyes, then we would identify with a universal presence. And if you notice, you accept your presence automatically. I remember when I was younger, I asked, I don't remember who, but I asked, what is God? And so the thought came, the answer came that it was as if like I concluded, okay, so they're saying God is all that is. And then I thought in all that is, there is also non-existence. As if everything is included, even nothing. And so I suddenly realized, what can create non-existence? And I realized the edge of the language threshold. This is usually in these Mr.Within talks, the profoundness is that I'm kind of trying to, I personally move beyond the language threshold. The language threshold is a concept I've created. And in some sense, it's just, I just, nobody's talking about it. And it brought a tear to my heart. But the language threshold is in some sense the aspects of experience that can no longer be contained in language. And what is unknown to us, if suddenly a random thing was just to, extraterrestrial thing was to appear, people would go around it and it will shock them. It would shock them because they are seeing a pattern they have not recognized before. A pattern they cannot place into the meaning of their world, into the knowledge of their inner world. Death is the ultimate show. Death is the show of nothing. You saw everything in the life, and now you see nothing. The caterpillar experienced legs, now it experiences wings after its metamorphosis. So for me, this consciousness is a sort of bubble. It's a sort of bubble where I've been identifying mainly, like earlier in my life, as the bubble. And now I'm understanding what before the bubble was made, and before the bubble and after the bubble, it's going to be the same moment. So in some profound way, I remember these people in when I went to India, there was a lot of non-duality speech and words about yoga. And I remember a part of me once suddenly thinking that there are people who see everything as non-dual. This was early on before who I am now. And what shocked me was that if we are all, let's say, the eyes of the universe and the eyes of God, then it's as if we are all one moment. As if me and you have been thinking we are characters in a movie, but it is actually just one painting. And this painting is kept in the space of the unknown, just like how matter is kept in space, floating in space. In some sense, your knowledge is floating in the unknown. And so knowledge it has a gravitational center. And that gravitational center is the most immediate idea your moment is accepted to originate the structure of the subtle view. Just like how different thoughts come and go, the Buddhists notice this, and they're like different lifetimes come and go. If somebody asks me how many lifetimes can you experience in one lifetime, I will say more than one. Because what is considered for now life is a story. For me, most of my problems were just, how can I say it? As if I thought I didn't understand something, so I was standing under the clarity. I couldn't see it. Society evolves when, just like how Carl Jung suggested, that everybody has a sort of shadow self, and you gotta look at the darker aspects of your existence and consciously incorporate it in a manner where it is in balance with the order. I find that now it is time for the whole civilization to do that. For all the cruel expressions in this existence to now, with a higher dimensional view, in some sense be readjusted. As if suddenly on some planet the creatures, after having built a sophisticated civilization, suddenly realize they have to step out of the cocoon and to be governed by the patterns of a new intelligent wave. As if I thought, what is this soul? Is the soul using the body as a vehicle? And then I thought about it, is the body using the soul as a vehicle, as a conceptual sort of self-proclamation? Like, we are oscillating between something and nothing all the time. We're looking at things, and then we're wondering about what's looking at it, and we suddenly find ourselves in the subjective realm. You're living two lives, you don't realize it. One is objective, one is subjective. You have two selves, you don't realize it. One is objective, the other is subjective. You're living in two worlds, and you don't realize it. One is objective, one is subjective. They can be seen to be codependent, they can seem to be separate, just like the yin-yang symbol. And yet all that is encompassed within chaos and order and any sort of dualistic interpretation or context of the universe, it can all be seen as one shape. As if the lords of knowledge looked at the lords of the unknown who were above them and beyond them. And the lords of knowledge shouted at the lords of the unknown. And they shouted and they said, where is the edge of our knowledge? Where is the edge? What is left after we have known everything? And it was then that the first wave and the answer came from the lords of the unknown. The lords of the unknown first responded in silence, and they saw the lords of knowledge did not understand. And then they responded with a voice in the fabric of the knowledge itself. The lords of the unknown looked at the lords of knowledge, and they shouted, and they commanded, and they said, you will only be free if you never needed to be. As Buddha's mindfulness emanates a sort of wisdom, to accept one's individuality is the first stage. To be able to recognize that you are not your thoughts, but you can be any thought you like. You can see any world. Your brain chemistry changes all the time, yet what the value of objective reality is that it's being witnessed. We are creatures on a rock spinning in the middle of nowhere who have now wondered about a dimension within. And the dimensions within are very complicated because they are in some sense, the pilot of consciousness must navigate the direct experience of the attention beyond the clouds of language, beyond the clouds of everything, every subjective structure your mind has ever conceived, every image that has had a meaning. You must suddenly find a new relationship in one moment that changes your relationship with all moments, in your recognition of a sort of universal presence beyond a sort of local personality, a non-local presence in relation to a local, again, personality. The stories of the world are needed to keep the show on. Just like how the vehicle requires fuel, as if like just like how the person requires food, the civilization requires stories to advance, to evolve. However, it will reach the language threshold, and when collectively we reach a language threshold, there comes this new vibe. There comes this new sort of mentality in the creatures that walk on this earth, where they are no longer reacting to just their inner reality, to just their outer reality and their inner reality. They are finding new ways to stand on this earth. And not to just stand on this earth, but to stand in the world as a moment. All moments have divine existential value, for they are here. If there was nothing here, like there'd be no value to talk about. But if there's something that even can consider a value, then there is some value there. And so I'll be honest, today I walked downtown, and as I was walking, my heart kind of broke. Because I was seeing so many defeated people on the street. So many people who their free will had led them astray from the collective path. And so I wondered what can you do with a world that's cruel? And in some sense, we've been given the solution of the animal, just fight and get to the next stage, you know. Fight and evolve. You know, that's pretty much how it's been. But I feel that when meaningless wars stop, then meaningful unions are found. Once the wars of physical reality have found a balance point, once the realms of the wars of the subjective realm have also found a balance point, and once the acceptance of the witness that is being your intelligence is also found in a balance point, then all these three balance points will create a sort of singularity between these different classifications of ways that you're experiencing life. I am saying that our educational system is separating your mind. It is teaching it to you in a multidimensional context. But what the ancients knew is that no greater wisdom can arrive from multidimensionality than the first dimension considered, as if the number 3 is like shouting that I'm true, I'm the truth, I'm the only number that's valid, and suddenly number 2 and number 2 begins to say no, you don't exist, it's me and the unknown. And so 1 and 2 are like, this 3 is talking too much. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the conclusion of one mode of truth finds itself to be built upon other truths, and all the other sub-classifications will find themselves eventually in space. So the truth of matter is in space, and that is why space exploration is heavily funded. We have to find a way to build bridges between realities. That's pretty much just society. That's the whole point of it. The whole point of society is for there to be efficient integration of different worlds of people through their personalities or through how they come across. You see, we're all actors on a stage. That's the thought of you is an actor right now, because it changes by the moment. Who you think you are now and who you think you are tomorrow are totally different. Or will be totally different. For me, it's been fascinating. When I became aware of this, it was like mind-boggling, because my relationship is that I don't claim to know, but I claim to be aware of the unknown. And to be aware of the unknown was the next level of knowledge, as I was saying earlier. Even Socrates reached this point. Socrates was like on a much higher level, but I'll tell you, like Socrates, he has this quote where he says, the only true wisdom is to know that you know nothing. Or the only true knowledge, as it's been written other ways. So what he's trying to tell you is that when you go trying to know more and learn more, you will eventually see there is more, as if like each bit of knowledge that you download is like you're shedding more light. You're exploring the forest, this vast forest at night with a flashlight, and you're just seeing more. But yet, there is more of the forest understood. The more evolved we become, the bigger the cost becomes. Just like how we look back at history, the caveman, like the caveman wasn't even there, but let's say the early humans who had entered civilization, they understood that their ancestors lived for something. And so our ancestors also lived for something. And our ancestors is humanity. You know? People take pride in their great grandfather, yet they have no image of their great grandfather's personality or realness. They might have an image, but like probably not. But like I'm saying, like the whole let's say great 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 grandfather, you definitely don't have an image for that grandfather. But I'm telling you is that the more complex the world becomes or is received in more of a complex way, the more complex truth will be to find, or results will be required to be more complex. So I find that if we create a civilization only based on complexity, we're going to miss out on all the unique perceptions that occur through simple living through spans of time. Because we, in some sense, in these talks, I'm saying, guys, humanity, let's rise, But at the same time, in another way, you got to see it that things also take time. That's what you understand from nature. When you go into nature, the first thing you realize is like, okay, your free will isn't that free. Like if you were one of those explorers in the safari, like a tiger could have attacked you or something. So your free will is able, but it is able in a domain of maintenance, in a domain of preservation. And I believe this is true. I believe people have to live for themselves in order to be itself able enough to live for others. You have a relationship with how you see yourself as an individual and how you see the world's individuality. How you see that we're in just the universe, or is there multiple universes? What are theoretical quantum physicists saying? Like, what is their careers? Their careers is based on trying to see the ways the electron moves in the sense that it doesn't. There's a story of a warlord. This warlord, it's kind of like a Zen story. So back in the day, this dude becomes a warlord, and it's like, okay, I don't like these monks. I just don't like them, And so the warlord commands his like army or his militia or whatever, to attack and kill every monk. So he goes from village to village, attacking and killing all the monks. The monks eventually find out, and the younger monks, and most pretty much all the monks just are like, holy shit, let's go to the mountains, and so they leave their monastery, they leave their presence in a moment. Now, how the story goes is that the right hand man of this warlord, he goes to one town, and like suddenly let's say general or something, like general comes up to him and says, "Yo, warlord." The chillest general in history goes and says, "Hey, warlord, we've killed all the monks, and usually they get scared off and they run. But there's this one older monk who sat on the grass of this monastery, and even though all of us are there, he's not moving. And because he's older than all the soldiers, none of the soldiers want to kill him, like in some way, And so the warlord is like, what?" The warlord is like, getting angry. Says, "What did you say?" And the warlord walks. And the warlord walks, his right-hand man, his whole entourage and militia, everybody's there. And the warlord suddenly sees the monk. And the warlord shouts. The warlord shouts and says, "Monk!" And this monk suddenly hears him and opens his eyes and sees the warlord. And the warlord says, "Monk, come here." And he's saying it with this rage building up in him. As if, how dare he defy him. As if this is a guy who wants to eradicate this being from existence, and how dare this being, knowing that, still stay here, you know? So the warlord goes up and says the monk to come in front of him, and everybody's watching, you know, and the warlord goes and says, and he's holding the grip of his sword as if he's about to, like, use it. He says, "Monk, do you know who I am? Do you know? I can have my sword in your stomach in an instant." And so from the back of the, you know, this warlord's army, some people were like, holy shit, crazy shit. It's like, no, he didn't just say that. And so what happens is that the monk still stands there. And the monk is strange. Because this monk is standing in chaos, but as if internally he's not in chaos. As if he got out of, like, he's still in the temple, in the monastery, even though, you know, this warlord is saying something to him. As if his inner reality has an unconditional freedom that the conditions of the outer cannot touch. And so the monk looks at this warlord, and everybody's watching, and the warlord's just watching. The monk says, "And do you know who I am?" And he smiles and he says, "I can have your sword in my stomach in an instant." And this shock enters the warlord where he doesn't know what to say, and they're all shocked. Because this warlord has found a man who does not have fear existing in his world. And not the fear of, like, there's inevitable fear. I mean, we all die, okay? Like, that's there. But for him, as if he was standing in a way where the warlord could not touch him. As if he had understood the presence of the intelligence of the mind being the universe. Untouchable by its aspect. It makes no difference for the space outside of the bubble, how the space inside figures out that. Physically, I think that monk was killed. But in some sense, he never could. Most intimidation occurs through storification. Most illusions come across as views of the world while already there's a world here. For me, the only education is exploration. What the hell are teachers doing? They should evoke the spirit of exploration within that child. So when that child finds himself in chaos, suddenly he says, "I was here to explore the order first." Our civilization is something that is built by our attention to it. Whatever the majority of creatures on this planet pay attention to, that moves forward. They say the eyes are the windows of the soul. And so where are these windows pointed? What is the soul allowing within its awareness? How is the moment taking shape? And how is it changing shape? The value of philosophy is the exploration and discovery of your own intelligence. It's the acknowledgement of universal truth. Philosophy is like the guide between the known and the unknown. It is the efforts of mankind, the different spears human beings have thrown at the unknown skies. Spears of theoretical knowledge, spears of realizing that nobody knows. Ladies and gentlemen, nothing knows in this world how the whole thing is. The fruit of the apple tree, that the fruit cannot see the evidence for the roots. Yet while it is connected, it cannot deny the root. We know that it cannot deny the root. And I find that we have to, in some sense, reach a point of ability before greater dimensions open up. In the movie Gladiator, there's a deleted scene where, I forget the guy's name, Commodus, like his when Maximus, like the main character in the movie Gladiator, when he was a general, he had Commodus, like that. There's a guy named Commodus who was his right hand man, and eventually, like when he becomes a slave, like a gladiator, Commodus comes to him before he has to fight the Emperor of Rome. And so, in that moment, Maximus is tied before he's being pulled up to go in the gladiator arena, and Commodus comes and says, "Maximus, I can get you out of here." And Maximus looks at him with this kind of mature grace, like knowing, and he says, "Nature." I'm like paraphrasing, I'm like summarizing, but he says, "Nature never puts someone in a situation where they can't handle or they can't experience. That means your experience is natural, regardless of what you do." And in some sense, in the view from Gladiator, like the dude's kind of saying, like, don't freak out about life too much, because you are given as much as you can eat. There are signs from the world that show if you are a creature that is embraced or disgraced. When I give these talks, I consider history to be the audience, the history of our species. And the modern generation, they are not only not studying history, they are forgetting the colors of the world, the findings of the world, the advancement of the ability of our species. Once the shadow aspects of our civilization are made conscious through a higher intelligence, and I'm going to get into what I mean by higher, but through a higher intelligence, just like how, again, what was his name? Carl Jung said, you incorporate the shadow consciously. So you consciously begin accepting how your moment is being. And in doing so, and abiding by the natural law of sincerity and honesty, you will find it. You find not what your eyes are looking for, but what your whole moment of being is. Every day our past is different. Every day how we see the future changes. Many worlds in one world in many worlds. Two truths. Two wings, one bird. I hope this talk has served you. Much blessings and namaste.